For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Feyi Olubodun joins me to discuss his book titled The Villager, How Africans Consume Brands. Welcome, Feyi.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell us what your book is all about and who are you targeting?
So the book is essentially about understanding the African consumer and how we can actually market brands and products to them, and how businesses should approach them with a proper understanding of who they are, how they are different from Western consumers, and all of that. And then the book is targeted largely at business owners, senior execs that make decisions around brands, product, marketing spend, and all of that, just to guide their decision making when it comes to the African market.
And why do you think many brands fail in the African marketplace?
I think it's because we brands bump into the invisible lens of culture, because culture is like the last leg in any marketing effort or initiative. After you've made a good product, you've put everything together, you've built your distribution and all of that, you still have to depend on the consumers to ultimately pick your products. And a lot of the times they consume your products within their own cultural framework and mindset. You know, so I believe that a lot of the times that actually becomes a barrier that causes brands to trip up, if I put it that way.
And one might ask, why do you think you are qualified to write on this subject?
Well, I'm one of the villagers, as I said on the cover of the book.
Yeah.
Apart from the obvious qualification of being an African, it's the fact that I've spent 15 years working in the market, largely in Nigeria, but I have worked on projects across multiple countries, and because I have a background in data analysis, research, strategy planning, and then I've also run a business, a creative agency now for the past 3.5 years to 4 years, helping clients to bring their brands to market. So I have quite a broad range of experience that qualifies me for that.
So why do you say that any company without a well-positioned or developed and fluently executed Africa strategy is not well-positioned in the medium and long-term horizon?
Yeah, so I say that because if you look at the next 20 to 30 years, most of the consumer population will be outside of the UK and Europe. Most of that will actually be on the African continent, where by the 30 years from now, 2050, we'll have a population that is 54% of the global population, which will be more than the population of Asia at that time. So a lot of growth is going to come from Africa. And therefore, any business that is planning to endure for more than 5 to 10 years, if they don't have an Africa strategy, they're not going to survive, because growth is slowing down everywhere else. In Europe, is slowing down. China used to be the driver of growth. Growth is slowing down on China. The Chinese are coming to Africa now. Africa is the next frontier of growth for businesses.
So as per your title of this book, why do you believe that the African consumer can be viewed as a villager?
So I say that because if you look at the spread of infrastructural development on the continent, it's not evenly distributed. It's not like the West, where it's evenly distributed across cities, municipalities, and so on and so forth. I mean, you can go to the UK, for instance, and see someone that have never been to London and who is who is a British person. You can see the same in the US, where they grow up in their county and they are okay because everything is there. So the level of intra-country migration is not as high as it is in Africa, where most African countries have about 2 or 3 cities that are well developed. Everywhere else is not well developed in terms of economic possibilities. So you then find that a lot of people leave the rural area to come to the city if they want to advance economically. But when they do, in order to retain their identity, they retain within themselves some of the core pillars that makes them who they are in the rural area. So the man is now in the city, or the woman is in the city, but she still has a psychological mindset of the village. So that's why I say that the African consumer is a villager, but the village is not a physical location in this case. It's the mindset by which they engage with life.
And why do you choose Nigeria as a proxy for Africa?
Well, if you look at the way the Africa is divided, we can broadly, from a cultural point of view, split Africa into three broad cultures. You have North Africa, that cultural profile of North Africa is essentially like that of the Middle East, because of proximity to the desert, and also because of the strong Islamic religion and so on and so forth in there. And then you look at the middle, what is popularly called the Sub-Saharan Africa. That will be West Africa, East Africa, and some just at the upper tip of Southern Africa. That's what is typically called, when academics use the phrase African culture, that's what they're actually referring to. But if you look at Southern Africa, primarily identified by South Africa as a country, there are actually two cultures in there. There's the Anglo-Dutch culture, which is a largely Western culture, really. And that's represented by typically the white South Africans. And then you have the Black Ubuntu culture, which is more communal culture, and a bit related to the Sub-Saharan African culture. Now, in research, if we're going to pick a proxy, it has to be a proxy that has enough diversity and representation for us to use. Now, if you look at Nigeria, Nigeria has all of that in it. You look at the fact that apart from population size and economic size and all of that, out of 1,500 languages spoken in Africa, 520 of those are spoken in Nigeria alone. In South Africa, you speak about 10 to 11, you look at the diversity of culture. The cultures are so diverse in some aspects that it's easier for a Nigerian to marry a foreigner than it is for a Nigerian to marry another Nigerian from another culture. So it's almost like you have multiple countries within one country. And there's such factors that give Nigeria the sort of the characteristics that made me decide to use it as a proxy for the rest of Africa.
You also believe that religion is an integral part of an African consumer's culture. Yes. Why?
So, the religion thing is really linked to, there's a concept that I talk about in the book, which is not original to me, the whole idea of locus of control, and how collectivist cultures, which is what an African culture is, have people, they have their locus of control externally, while Western cultures, that are individualistic cultures, people have their locus of control internally. The example I like to use is, if you ask a British man, are you going to be late for the meeting? He'll say, yes. By how many minutes will you be late? He can tell you I'll be late in 5 minutes. Where I come from, if I call you and say I'm running late, you say, when am I going to get there? I'll tell you I'll get there soon. I might even say I'll get there soon by God's grace, because, and you see, that small example shows that one culture believes I can control the factors that determine when I arrive at a place. Another person believes there are a lot of factors that determine it and doesn't lie within me. Now, that difference is why the African is religious from a cultural point of view. The nature of the religion is relevant. It's not about whether they are Christian, Muslims, or traditional religion. It's the religious nature of the African comes from the cultural belief that the outcome of my life is determined by a lot of other factors beyond myself, so hence the tendency to be more religious in orientation than Westerners.
You studied 4 years at a medical school before changing to psychology. Yes. How did it came about?
Well, I originally wanted to be a medical doctor. I've always had a strong interest in humans, and I thought being a medical doctor would satisfy that. Unfortunately, I didn't pass all the exams required to go to the next level, so I had to leave. But thankfully, there was the opportunity to switch to another department, another course of study. So I switched to psychology, which still allowed me to study humans, even though I'm not dissecting them anymore.
So, other than what we've spoken about, what are you hoping people will achieve more from this book?
So my hope for this book, or if I may use the word legacy, even though it's still a bit early to use that word, is really for, I want the conversation to start around Africans, what makes us different. I want the conversation to start around us celebrating our uniqueness, appreciating it, embracing it even, and then beginning to look at that to say, if this is what makes us different as Africans, how do we then use that to build businesses? How do we use that to shape our political structures? How do we use that to market brands and products to Africans, both for multinational companies and even African companies that want to travel to other African countries and expand across the continent? So that's really my hope, that people will take a second look at what we've been doing so far and say, is this working or not? What if we try it this way? You know, are we seeing something different here based on this?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That was Feyi Olubodun speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about his book titled The Villager: How Africans Consume Brands.